Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the organizers of this session, the General Authority for Foreign Trade, the Ministry of Energy, SABIC, and King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, I would like to welcome you all in this event where distinguished moderator and speakers will enrich us through brilliant discussion to understand how circularity can direct to sustainable future. I would like to thank the Secretariat of WTO for their remarkable effort to organize this third edition of Trade and Environment Week, which will certainly benefit all of us from the discussions on ways to make global trade more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive, and to explore different approaches to adaptation and mitigation of climate change risks and challenges. Thank you. Mary, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Maha. Good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us both in person and virtually. It is my pleasure to moderate this event. My name is Mari Lwami, and I am a fellow at the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Riyadh. As you know, the main focus of this week is on exploring and identifying ways to make global trade more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. And addressing climate change and achieving environmental sustainability are obviously at the heart of this. Yet, in order to achieve the two pillars, the two other pillars of sustainable development, namely the economic and the social, also need to get addressed to be able to have both people and businesses on board for necessary transitions. In this event today, we wish to draw attention to two interlinked concepts that together contribute to circularity, namely the circular economy and the circular carbon economy. The former is much better known as it's been around for decades. Circular economy focuses on resources, materials, and products, and it aims to achieve sustainable production and consumption through circularity of these materials. Circular carbon economy, in turn, is exclusively focused on energy, greenhouse gas emissions, and CO2 emissions in particular. Its end goal is net zero emissions. The CCE, as we call it, has a number of further features that I'd like to highlight. First, it emphasizes the need for technology neutral approaches. All technologies, all hands need to be on deck, from renewables through energy efficiency, through solutions such as carbon capture and storage. Second, the CC recognizes that given that countries have different national circumstances, their road to net zero or carbon circularity will also always look different. They'll be employing a different mix of these technologies and solutions. And third, and perhaps most importantly for this event today, the CCE concept emphasizes value creation. So while carbon definitely is an externality, it's not always necessarily only an externality. And recognizing the value of carbon may unlock innovation and solutions. While obviously the ultimate goal still remains reaching net zero and avoiding these emissions getting to the atmosphere. In a nutshell, the circular economy and the circular carbon economy focus on two crucial aspects of circularity: material flows and emission flows. And in both areas, there are inherent opportunities for value creation and for fostering international trade and sustainable development. Now, with that, our speakers today are all experts in their fields, and they represent different actors in circularity in Saudi Arabia, namely government, business, and research. Each will share their insights and solutions, which include how governments can foster circularity, how businesses can build on related value creation opportunities, and how the development of metrics for cross-country comparisons can indicate areas for either further focus or further cooperation. First, we'll kick off with a presentation by Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Amri, who is an international policy analyst at the Saudi Ministry of Energy. We'll start by examining the concept of circularity, and will then provide an overview of how the government of Saudi Arabia is putting this concept into practice. Over to you, Abdulaziz.
Thank you very much, Mary, and good day to colleagues, and thank you for everyone who's joining us today virtually and in person. I'll be sharing my screen right now, and I hope it's visible from your end. Okay, great. So for today's presentation, we will be examining circularity and looking at it for how it's going to contribute to a more sustainable future. So first of all, we will be giving you an overview of what circularity is, and then zooming in a bit and looking at circularity in action. And then finally, we will be ending with a step forward in which the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is taking this approach to achieve its climate ambitions and climate goals, as well as how circularity will contribute to global trade. So first of all, we have a circularity and initially we had the 3 R's: the reduce, reuse, and the recycle. They were developed and applied to address the negative externalities of waste. Later on, the framework evolved into a much broader economy level concept, which, as we all know, is the circular economy, with the idea of closing on the loop on waste flows as an externality, as a negative externality. So we have the 3 R's. We address the waste flows and partially addressing the GHG emission flows. However, looking at it from a climate perspective, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia saw that there is an opportunity over here. So therefore, we saw that the missing pillar over here was the removal pillar. And what exactly is the removal pillar? So the removal pillar addresses the emissions as a waste, and gives you and combines it with the circular economy and circular carbon economy into one circularity concept, which we are all striving for. So the removal pillar, it refers to all technologies and innovations that remove GHG emissions. And it includes technologies such as carbon capture, mineralization, alkalinization, direct air capture, an ecosystem-based approach, as well as nature-based solutions, tree planting. So why should we care about this? Because we have the IPCC Working Group 2 report released recently this year, confirming the vital role of the removal aspect, and that all 1.5 scenarios used in the IPCC report deploy carbon dioxide removal technologies. And it confirms that without these technologies, most models cannot generate pathways that limit the temperature rise to 1.5. So the 4 R's of circularity, by having a full circularity of both material and emission flows via deployment of technologies and innovations. And in this context, it will help us in achieving emissions neutrality, where we actually avoid, abate, and remove GHG emissions. And here we have an example of some of the technologies that are used for each R. So on the reduce side, we have the deployment of renewables and deployment of energy efficiency programs. On the reuse side, we have the carbon capture and utilization. So we look at it, we're looking at carbon not only as a negative externality, but as something that could be used to generate value. Also on the recycle side, we have the waste flow of re-entering into production. And on the removal side, we have promising technologies such as carbon capture and storage, as well as direct air capture. So with the 4 R's of circularity, if we zoom out, it's at its core, circularity as a model has the intention of removing negative externalities such as waste and GHG emissions. In a circularity model, externalities are avoided by deploying the 3 R's of reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove, and thus closing the loop and flow becomes circular. And instead of having negative externalities, we close the loop on the circularity and effectively address waste and emissions. So circularity in action, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, here we're giving you a historic example of circularity applied at the economic level. The case of building the master gas system in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. Back then, the kingdom had methane emissions were almost at 400 million tons of CO2 equivalent. However, thanks to circularity measures deployed back then, it was slashed down to 50 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2015 by converting waste into valuable feedstock, closing the loop of circularity, thus creating jobs, improving air quality, and diversifying the economy. And it's important to note that this has added approximately 40% to the industrial GDP. And this is the economic value that we see in circularity. Next, we have a much larger example of application of circularity. So in 2020, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has launched the Circular Carbon Economy National Program, aiming at delivering its climate change ambitions, as well as achieving its Vision 2030. We took each R and applied it to key economic sectors by putting in place multiple enablers to help with this program, such as engagement in communication, having the right investments and financing, building the human capital and capacity, building the right infrastructures needed, thus providing the sustainability value and economic value put into implementation. So here are some of the deployment pillars for the CCE national program. So we have on the technology side, we're looking to prioritize solutions-based. As Mary has said at the beginning, we're looking to tap into each and every available option without removing any possible option that could help us in closing the loop and achieving a circular carbon economy in the kingdom. Also, we're looking to advance the CCE technologies with sustained research and development and pilot projects that the kingdom is already working on, and many of which will see the light very, very soon. On the policy side, we're looking to provide enabling mechanisms for investments and technology deployment, as well as promoting trade. Also developing robust measurements, reporting, and verification systems for the circular carbon economy. On the communication and the capacity building side, we're looking to enhance those by engaging all possible stakeholders, both from private and public sectors, to achieve this, to achieve the goal of the circular carbon economy. Here's a quick snapshot on the initiatives that the kingdom is undergoing in its national program. So we have around 260 initiatives focused on closing the loop on both waste and emissions, both with the participation of the public and private sectors, focusing on each and every R. As I said earlier, it's a national program, and this is one of the ways the kingdom has announced in its NDCs last year that through the circular carbon economy, it will aim to achieve its net zero targets. So a step forward for the kingdom in achieving a circular approach. So on the kingdom is taking across its ecosystem on the technical level, on the enablers and the engagement. So on the technical level, the teams here in the kingdom are working to assess key CCE technologies and applications, identifying priority technologies to develop national strategies, for example, on hydrogen and CCUS. And as many of you may have heard, the kingdom is taking many steps in terms of becoming an exporter for green hydrogen. And CCUS technologies are continuously progressing here in the kingdom. And through that, we're prioritizing our initiatives for accelerated implementation, supporting key stakeholders with the required enablers. Also, we are monitoring the emissions in the kingdom by sectors and expected impact of launched CCE initiatives, creating and designing the business models and enabling mechanisms for CCE technologies and its applications here in the kingdom. Also, as we earlier stated, that the CCE regulations and policy standard requirements are continuously being developed here in the kingdom to support the full implementation. On the engagement side, the kingdom is working throughout in its ecosystem, its energy ecosystem, and throughout the government into showcasing the CCE in key global conferences, bilateral engagements, and with industry and international organizations. Because, as we said earlier, the CCE aims to work on each and every national circumstance for each country. Therefore, it will be very much up to countries to choose the right technologies for them, and through that we will help enhance the capacity of all countries in respect to addressing their emissions. Also, by providing technical and policy information related to the CCE framework through online engagements and workshops and such as the one we have here today. So by taking it forward, the kingdom also last year has launched the Saudi Green Initiative, where it will be addressing its climate goals with almost 60 plus initiatives that have been announced last year, and with the aim of reducing carbon emissions by more than 278 million tons per annum by 2030. Also raising its protected areas to more than 30% of marine and terrestrial areas, also planting 10 billion trees across Saudi Arabia. And this will all help in implementing the circular carbon economy and achieving the climate goals of the kingdom. And of course, this will happen through continuous engagement with all stakeholders and partners in achieving this goal. So in summary, circularity aims to address the negative externalities, hence adding a sustainability and economic value by closing the loop on waste and emissions. It unlocks new opportunities for the global economy. It will promote global trade by enhancing the transfer of technology and cooperation and collaborations with all countries. And it will help implement the tools and deployment experience in regards to knowledge sharing and lessons learned from all countries in our approach to achieving our sustainable development goals as well as Paris Agreement goals. And thank you very much for your time, and back to you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Abdulaziz. Let me make a note here in between that we will have a Q&A at the end, and we very much welcome questions from the audience. So if you are present in the room, we will give you the opportunity to raise your hand and ask a question from the floor after the three presentations. And if you're joining us virtually, please put your questions in the chat box. If you have any questions, feel free to start adding them already, and we'll take as many as we can at the end of the event. Now, next, we will turn to Dr. Fahad Al-Sharehi, who is the Vice President of Energy Efficiency and Carbon Management at the Saudi chemicals giant SABIC. He'll share his company's approach to circularity and discuss related solutions and opportunities that the company is already implementing or is going to be pursuing. The floor is yours, Dr. Fahad.
Thank you very much, Mary, and I would like to thank all the participants and also the organizing team for the invitation to share with you our journey with the circularity. So you can see the slides. Yes, first slide, please. Next. Yes, so for us in SABIC, the sustainability, and as Abdulaziz mentioned in his presentation, SABIC establishment is a sustainability story. And we are proud of this. You know, a lot of natural gas in the early 70s associated with the oil production was burned. And at that time, the Saudi government established the master gas system where the natural gas collected and converted to a valuable product. And this is where the establishment. Since then, sustainability for us is one of our foundation and our strategy for SABIC, where we, as a responsible company, will commit to be responsible where we are operating to protect the environment and provide all the support needed for where we are operating, either through our operation or the solution and material that we are providing for our stakeholder. If you go next. So if you see from business perspective, what are the key drivers for circularity? I mean, why the people, they are caring about the circularity and why it is important? I think there are some the pillars or drivers. Disruptive innovation, which is something very important and is a key enabler and will create a transformation in the industry, and the disruption could happen and transform our industry, and we need to be ready for adapting as well as creating the value from the innovation. Of course, the global and regional regulations, and as you can see that there are more and more pressure and regulations around the world when it comes to the environment and the ESG as a totality. Customer expectation, and we see this is coming from many of our customers that we are dealing with. They are asking us about our production as well as our product. They are even asking for the carbon footprint of the product that we are producing. So customer expectation and customer need is something that we need to address, because this is helping the entire value chain. Same thing here, applicable to the investor expectations and availability for fund for the future investment. It will be, I think, it will be challenged by where this investment will go, how good this investment and addressing the climate change challenges. Of course, the last, which is about the disclosure and transparency, and this is demanded by all the stakeholders. We need to, as you are reporting your performance, your financial, there are now more demand into being more transparent and reporting how your product or how your business impacting the environment as well as the society and in general. So I think the name of the game here is turning challenges into opportunities. Go on next slide. I think Abdulaziz covered very well the definition of the circular carbon economy and Saudi Arabia role in getting the approval during the G20. And from our business here or from our industry, we see circular carbon economy as a key enabler to achieve our carbon neutrality. And that's why we choose the circular carbon economy as the framework to develop our carbon neutrality strategy. The good thing about the circular carbon economy, it provides you the flexibility. It depends where you are operating, availability of infrastructure, even affordability, without being biased to any option or any art from the reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove. So we believe that for our industry, the circular carbon economy will be a key enabler and will provide the flexibility as well as the agility to achieve our ultimate goal to address the climate change challenges. Next slide. So this is our commitment, which was announced during the Saudi Green Initiative, our carbon neutrality for our scope 1 and 2 by 2050. And also we already announced our interim target, which is a kind of a commitment from our side to reduce our emission scope 1 and 2 to 20% by 2030. For the scope 3, as it is addressing the entire value chain, we commit to work with our stakeholders, our customer, as well as our supplier for the entire value chain to reduce the emission. Go to the next. And this is our model for the circular carbon economy, addressing the 4 R. If you take, for example, the reduce, which address in the short term, and with the help of the energy efficiency program that we have in Saudi Arabia, as well as our initiative globally, which is, you can call it the low-hanging fruit, is improving our performance in our operation, as well as reducing or improving our energy efficiency. Not to our assets, but also providing material and solution and helping in that direction. Same thing for the reuse, for the remove, as well as for the recycle. I will just give you some of the story that we have under the different R to share with you what we are doing and what we are practicing today, and also what we are planning to practice or deploy in the future. If you move to the next slide. Yeah, this is one of the largest CO2 capturing. It's a flagship that we are proud of, where the CO2 500,000 of CO2 equivalent capture and converted to a product, and as well as for the value. So it was a key enabler for us to address the capturing as well as the reuse, and also using a technology that we developed inside SABIC. It was very helpful, and we received many awards and recognition for this technology as well as for this plant. And many of the countries, they are interested to adapt as well as using the same technology or the approach that we are using for the CO2 utilization in this case. As another example, if you go to the next slide, where combined with the urea, to produce the urea, it's very helpful to produce the AdBlue product, which can be added to the diesel to reduce the harmful NOx in the diesel engine. So this is another example of how the CO2 utilized in creating a solution that can help the environment. Next slide. This is one of the collaboration that we have with Aramco, and as well as with the Japanese Institute of Energy to demonstrate the supply chain, where the first shipment of blue ammonia from Saudi Arabia shipped to Japan for utilization for the blue ammonia. So we demonstrated in this exercise the shipment of 45 tons of blue ammonia from KSA to Japan for the utilization, which is a kind of a proof point that this is doable, and we have the infrastructure to produce it, as well as the infrastructure to transfer it safely to the customers. Next. This is also very helpful that, as I said, about the customer expectation, certifying some of the product and looking at and providing to our customer a low carbon footprint products. And this is one of the our plant producing methanol and get the certification for circular methanol, which create a differentiation here for us and creating value through utilization as well as the capturing the CO2. Next. Globally, this is one of our projects that we are considering in UK and leveraging the availability of blue hydrogen to decarbonize our cracker there as a solution to reduce our emission. And this is where we are saying the circular carbon economy, that it is not biased to any solution, and it depends on the availability of infrastructure, availability of technology, affordability, accessibility to the resources, where you can implement and utilize the technology like the blue hydrogen in this case. If you go to the next slide. Renewable energy, as you are all aware, is something very important and is a key enabler for the net zero. And we put in our strategy our ambition to have our energy totally coming from renewable energy, because this will be a key enabler for us in the electrification of many of the equipment. If it is utilizing or by burning hydrocarbon, if we can using renewable energy, this will be very helpful to reduce the emission significantly. And this is the picture that we get the support from the Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia to get access to renewable energy to help us to achieve our target. Also globally, if you go to the next slide, this is one of our plants in Cartagena in Spain, where it will be the first chemical plant. All the energy used there is using the renewable energy. Also, we sign agreements or similar agreement in Netherlands, and also one of our projects in the United States. So the renewable energy is a key enabler for us to achieve the circular, to achieve our carbon neutrality ambition. If you go to the next slide. This is one of the, the importance of collaboration and working with the entire value chain, and sometimes also we can work with your competitor. This is a real example or a showcase for collaboration between us and BASF as well as Linde to develop the first electrical cracker. A couple of weeks ago, we celebrated the start of the construction of the plant in Germany. We get also support from the German government to supporting this demonstration unit, and we'll be ready to deploy it. And this will be very helpful to reduce more than 90% of the CO2 emission in a cracker, and a cracker for the chemical or petrochemical industry, one of the biggest source of CO2 emission. So here, the collaboration technology as a key enabler and innovation is something needed to address our challenges. Go to the next slide. This is now I will address and focus more on the plastic recycling as a topic. Now you can say it is getting more and more attention for many of our key stakeholders. And as you can see in this slides, the public opinion versus the benefits that we are seeing. And what we are saying here, that the plastic is not the problem. It's actually how we are using and how we are utilizing the plastic is the issue. Otherwise, the plastic is solving many of our challenges today, providing material, providing alternative material. It was very helpful during the pandemic, also in the food, preserving the food for longer time. So there are many advantages, but the key challenge is here how we gonna deal with the plastic waste and how we can manage. And this is need a collective effort between the stakeholder, governments, NGOs, business, and also the society as a totality. If you go to the next slide to show what we are doing, this is the program that we launched about the True Circle, where we are considering all the elements of the recycling of plastic, from mechanical recycling, design for recyclability, also the chemical recycle, where we are bringing the material back to the feed. And we have many successful stories as seen here in the picture, and I will share in more detail some of the success story or the recent successful story. If you go to the next slide, this is the concept of the circularity here for the plastic. As you can see that going for the linear is either the plastic will end in the landfill or to the ocean, or even if it is burned for the energy recovery. What we are recommending here for the chemical recycling is if collecting this plastic and then convert it back as a feedstock. And we are here achieving two goals. One is preserving the resources and reducing the emission, as well as reducing the impact on the environment. If you go to the next slide, we are pioneer in this area, and this is the plant that under construction in Europe for the chemical recycling of the plastic, and it will be in operation Q1 2023. And the good news here that we received many inquiries, and I'm not exaggerating, that out of our customer lining up to get the material, because this will be a total recycled material from the origin, and to go for different application and different business sectors. Another example, if you go to the next slide, this is again the importance of the collaboration for the entire value chain, and this is one of the concepts called closed loop, where you are work with the brand owner as well as the Tesco, for example, in UK. I mean the supermarket, and collecting the material, bring it back, utilizing it and bring it back. So this is working for the entire value chain. We found it very successful, and we are seeing many people, they are interested, and brand owner as well as the OEMs, they are interested to work together with us in the closed loop collaboration. We have similar with the PepsiCo, and we have many examples in this direction, which is a showcase for the collaboration or the importance of collaboration for the value chain. Go to the next. This is another example of employing or utilizing the digitalization, where about the traceability, and this is, you can scan this code, where you can go and see this material, where it comes from, where it is collected, and this will bring more transparency, and people, they know what's the origin of the material. And we found it a very helpful for the creating transparency and traceability of the material we are producing. So just share with you some of the example, a recent example, the material that we are producing, or what we call the lightweight material, which we are giving to the automotive, for example, or transportation in general. This will help in reducing the energy consumption, as well as reducing the emission indirectly. I want to go to the last slide, I would just want to have to close with some of the remarks. I think collaboration across the value chain is the key. Nobody can do it alone, not a country, not a company. So collaboration here is the key success, and this is the key enabler for the future. Innovation and availability of technology is a key for accelerating the efforts. And there are many efforts and collaboration and around the innovation, around developing a technology. And I show you that even you can work with your competitor to develop, because there is a very good ambition as well as objective that everybody wants to achieve. Infrastructure availability is something key here, and investing to provide the right infrastructure will be very helpful to achieve our goal. Government support and also allowing for the time. This is something very crucial, and I see many of the countries and the government, they are providing the right support in different perspectives. Public awareness is something very important and very crucial, because they can contribute it big time. The last, which is about human capital and the youth, and how we can bring capability as well as the capacity, where the talented people that needed for the new economy or the new industry. With this, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope I didn't breach my time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fahad, for this very comprehensive overview. Our third presentation today is by Al-Jawhara Al-Gayed, who is a senior associate at the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, KAPSARC, here in Riyadh. She will provide an overview of the Circular Carbon Economy Index, which is a policy tool developed by KAPSARC for country comparisons, benchmarking, and analysis. Over to you, Al-Jawhara.
Thank you so much, Mari. So let me just share my screen very quickly. Okay, perfect. So I would like to thank everyone joining us today, either in person or virtually. So I believe Dr. Fahad and Abdulaziz have shared a really thorough introduction to the concept of CCE, which I believe provides a really good segue to my presentation. So just to briefly reiterate, the CCE concept or the CCE framework aims to support countries' transition to net zero emissions through basically a holistic and a technology neutral approach. This is also taking into consideration and recognizing that each country may have its own different pathway to achieve emissions reduction, and also taking into consideration the different national contexts and the availability of resources, the availability of technology, and the different economic profiles unique to these countries. So since the panel today is about circularity, it's also important to link this back to the circular economy, which has been mostly focused on material flows, whereas the circular carbon economy addresses energy and emission flows as a whole. There's a lot, of course, that these concepts hold, which require quantitative frameworks to help us better conceptualize them and to also help us quantify what they actually mean. So when it comes to the circular economy, there have been many attempts to measure and quantify the circularity of materials and products. But these efforts have been mostly focused on...
Al-Jawhara, can you please speak up? And
yes.
Because the interpreters, they're having difficulties.
Sure. Can you hear
Thank
me?
you.
Can you hear me all right now? Okay. So when it comes to the circular economy, as I mentioned, there has been a lot of efforts to measure and quantify the circularity of materials, but these efforts have been mostly focused on organizations and evaluating organizations, with the exception of the EU Circular Economy Monitoring Framework, which assesses progress towards the circular economy across EU member states. So there is a gap when it comes to efforts to measure cross-country performance in this space. The CCE or circular carbon economy concept, on the other hand, is a relatively more recent one, and there have not been any previous attempt to develop metrics to quantify it and to make it more concrete. So although it's a new concept, many elements of it actually already exist today on the ground. And they have been demonstrated globally under different maybe labels or different policy umbrellas. So I'm hoping to share some of these through my presentation today on the CCE index. Okay. So the idea behind developing the Circular Carbon Economy Index was to expand and add rigor to the conceptual basis of the concept of CCE, and to also develop a robust and quantitative framework that measure country performance and progress and potential towards achieving a circular carbon economy. So the resulting CCE index is a composite indicator that measure various dimensions of the CCE in a national context across countries. So the CCE has two main functions, I would say. The CCE index, sorry. So the index is intended to enable further discussions around ways to identify, measure, and compare countries' performance, strengths, and weaknesses in terms of applying the CCE concept, and to also help in pinpointing areas where progress is already well underway and where further policy efforts are needed or could be beneficial. The index also aims to promote a further understanding of the CCE concept and the overall idea of adopting a holistic approach to managing emissions across energy systems and across economies. So some of the questions that we try to answer through the index are how are countries engaging with a wide range of climate mitigation options and technologies? How are countries positioned to accelerate progress toward becoming circular carbon economies? How do different countries compare to each other on both their performance as well as their transition potential? So we also attempt to answer how major oil producing countries are managing carbon circularity and preparing their oil and gas and energy intensive sectors toward achieving net zero emissions. So this slide right here shows an overview of the CCE index framework. So the index quantifies and compares country performance and potential on the CCE through looking at 37 quantitative indicators from a harmonized international data set. So the index has two sub-indices. The first one is the CCE performance score, which measures countries' performance on 8 major CCE activities. These include energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification, nuclear energy, fuel switching, natural sinks, and of course, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as well as green hydrogen. The performance score looks at what countries are doing at the moment and how well they are doing it. The second sub-indice look at how well are countries positioned to make progress toward net zero. So the enabler score aims to measure the enabling environment and transition potential of these countries in five areas. These include the policies and regulations, the technology, knowledge and innovation area, the finance and investment, the business environment and energy security, and finally, looking at the socioeconomic context. So the average of the performance and enabler scores gives us a country's total CCE index score. The team has also added an experimental dimension looking at how oil producers and looking at it from an oil producer's lens, which enables maybe more meaningful comparison across oil producers specifically. Okay. So this slide here shows the scores and rankings results from the 2021 edition of the index. As you can see, Norway, the UK, and Germany are among the top performers. These countries, of course, could provide us with a lot of valuable lessons on incorporating areas of the CCE, especially when it comes to the question of how to bring other countries up to speed. On the right hand of the spectrum, we also see major economies that hold significant shares of global CO2 emissions. So it's important to also evaluate how these countries can adjust and can learn from the top performers to ramp up their transition towards net zero through the CCE lens. So the first edition of the index provided scores for a total of 30 countries, including the G20 and major oil producers. But I also have great news. The next edition, which will be published during the COP27, just in probably 2 weeks, will cover 30 additional more countries, bringing the total up to 60 and covering almost 90% of global GDP as well as emissions. So although most of the index indicators have a domestic focus, there are maybe 2 that have an international focus and look at the theme of trade and connectivity more broadly. The first is high technology interaction. And we see a different set of high performers on this indicator, which is basically measured through looking at the share of high tech, looking at high tech as a share of exports and imports, and taking this as a proxy for technology diffusion as well as the absorption capacity of a certain country. The second indicator focuses on financial connectedness, and it's mainly measured through internal FDI flows as well as capital outflows. And Germany is still a high performer here, but it's also interesting to see countries from the Gulf region ranking highly on this indicator. So there are just a general high-level messages I'd like to share here. Of course, the index has limitations, and there remains significant work in all countries, basically, to reach circular carbon economies. Again, we have the top performers for 2021 for Norway, the UK, and Germany, and they received the best scores on both the performance and enablers sub-indices. In terms of performers, we see that energy efficiency, renewables, and electrification currently make the greatest contribution towards countries' score. And we see a significant potential also for scaling up in areas of renewable energy, carbon capture, utilization and storage, as well as hydrogen. So there are a lot of gaps in countries among areas of policies and regulation, technology, knowledge and innovation, as well as finance and investment. Okay, so I would like to encourage the audience to access the CCE Index web portal, which include tools and resources that allow users to visualize countries in different groups, for example, or look at individual indicators and deep dive into a specific country. The portal also includes an index lab, which has 2 simulation tools allowing advanced users to change, for example, the weights on scores, the weights or scores on individual indicators, and observe how countries' scores and rankings respond to these measures or changes. On the portal, you will also find all the publications around the CCE Index, the results for the year of 2021, soon the results for the year 2022, the data and indicator descriptions, and the research papers describing the index methodology, the conceptual framework, and the foundational aspects that were taken into consideration when developing the index. And with this, I end my presentation, and back to you, Mari.
Thank you so much, Johara. I would now like to open the floor, or rather, I would like to open the Q&A part of this session. Before I open the floor, I will take the right to ask a couple of questions to the panelists. But please, in the meantime, add your questions to the chat if you're joining us virtually, or be prepared. There will be a chance. My colleague, Dr. Maha, will be opening the floor for questions from the room. I wanted to start by saying that I think one of the observations, or one of the key messages for myself personally from listening to these presentations, is that, as Dr. Fahad said, in the case of plastic, the material in itself is not necessarily the problem, it's how we use it. And I think this applies similarly to energy and related emissions. It's how we use carbon in the economy. So it's a key theme across this idea of circularity that colleagues today here are talking about. And another key message would be that collaborative efforts, very much in the spirit of the WTO as well, collaborative efforts are needed to address these challenges and turning them into opportunities. And this needs to happen across the value chain with all stakeholders involved. Now, let me start with one question, and I think this would go to Abdulaziz and Dr. Fahad. As was mentioned, I believe it was Abdulaziz in particular who said that the CCE in particular has potential to contribute to sustainable international trade. Then we also heard that technology is absolutely critical and key in achieving successful transitions to net zero and circularity. What Al-Jawhara highlighted in her presentation very clearly is how the CC index shows that there are still major gaps in how countries are performing and how they're positioned to make progress towards net zero and circularity in terms of their potential and their readiness. So with this in mind, my question is, how do you see the circular carbon economy approach benefiting countries that have limited technology potential and capacities and limited resources? I'll give a couple of examples as sort of food for thought. Abdulaziz, you mentioned that the Saudi government has policies in place to promote trade. So clean hydrogen comes in mind as one example where the government is getting very active in Saudi Arabia. But there are certain advantages in terms of technology already in the country. And then Dr. Fahad, you laid out various areas where SABIC is producing products that are intended to export. One more further thought is Saudi Arabia has a Middle East Green Initiative, which has these international dimensions already. And given that Saudi Arabia is promoting the CCE, there might be some examples in this space. So in a nutshell, let's start with Abdulaziz. How can the CC benefit countries with limited resources and technology and potential?
Thank you very much, Mary, and was truly very informative presentations by Dr. Fahad and Al-Jawhara. In regards to your question, as you have heard from the various presentations, that we're trying to create a value out of the emissions captured and the emissions from closing the loop on circularity, and therefore we come with an aspect of promoting trade between countries and thus creating a lot of value added to economies. That being said, this is where circularity, the beauty of circularity is that the countries implementing these processes or programs in regards to closing the loop on circularity is that each country will have the ability to tap in whichever they can. So in essence, each country will be able to choose the technology that fits with their national circumstances. So you'd have some countries that already have huge, vast amounts of land when it comes to forestry. And as we said, that would act as a nature-based solution or ecosystem-based approach. So there's that. They would not need to implement such policies or promote or deploy technologies such as CCUS, because that's covered in some sector of their in their country. So it gives you an all options, all solutions kind of approach, this circularity, giving each country the ability and to choose whichever aspect of that they seem more comfortable with. And I'm not sure if you wanted me to touch upon the Middle East Green Initiative or not, but back to you.
Sure, Abdulaziz. So I guess your message is that it is not only about technologies. There are many options. If you keep your options open, countries have a lot of other types of resources, and there's always energy efficiency, for example, and some technology costs obviously are coming down. Please, if you want to say a few more words about the Middle East Green Initiative. I understand the CCE is one of the themes underneath it. So perhaps what kind of collaborations are emerging in this space under the Middle East Green Initiative?
Thank you very much, Mary. And just quickly on the Middle East Green Initiative, as it was announced last year by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister, he and along with other leaders from Middle East and Africa came together here in Riyadh and launched the Middle East Green Initiative. So through the Middle East Green Initiative, there are plans to plant around 50 billion trees in the region. And that will happen, of course, with many partners in the world, as well as it's also announced that there are a lot of collaborations and cooperations in the region. So there will be a regional hub for climate change, a regional center for carbon extraction, use and storage, as well as a cooperative platform to accelerate the implementation of circular carbon economy. And that, of course, as I said, will be in coordination with these countries participating in the region, as well as different partners and different stakeholders from different sectors, including multi-development banks, research centers, and basically everyone who can contribute to achieving the goals of the Middle East Green Initiative.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. So we look forward to hopefully seeing and hearing more very soon. Dr. Fahad, your company is very much engaged with technology, and you just showcased a number of very innovative solutions that you're, in some cases, already putting into practice. How can countries with less potential, less resources do the same? Or how can they benefit from the CCE approach?
Thank you very much. I think Abdulaziz covered very well many of the examples, but the way that I looked at it, you can look at it from different perspectives. That if we capitalize and putting the collaboration approach toward achieving the same goal and ambition, and as you can appreciate now, almost all the countries now they announce their carbon neutrality strategy as well as the target. China announced 2060, Saudi Arabia announced 2060, India announced 2070. So many of the nations, they already now announced their carbon neutrality target. One area which potential for collaboration is about, if we look at about the industry and where we are putting some of the industry, like for example, heavy industry, which having high carbon emission. And if it's nearby a resource or a place where having access to either renewable energy or a CCUS hub, like what we have in Saudi Arabia. So rather than transferring the energy, so it might be good to have to bring the industry to places where solution as well as technology available, and vice versa, where you have places where there is a limited, then you can go for a low carbon emitting technology or a low carbon industry. So this is another way to look at it, or another perspective to look at it. Natural will help a lot in this case, that if there are some natural resources or natural solution that can help some of the country, it could mitigate for as a transition for the time when the technology is available. Because as you can appreciate, there are some breakthrough in the technology need to be done, and to make it viable. First, technically viable. Second, economically viable and dependent on the affordability. So I think the key success factor here is the collaboration between different countries, where leveraging the strength of each to achieve a common goal.
Absolutely. So collaboration, pooling, and differentiation of roles is what I'm hearing from you. So let me take up one more question, and this is for all panelists. We'll start with Al-Jawhara. We heard a lot about the value added of the CCE and its benefits, and we heard how, for example, it's applicable to different country contexts. It allows system-wide approaches. It allows comparing different technology options when you keep all your options open. However, we are in a stage where countries they have a major challenge with energy transitions and emission reductions. And so just getting your perhaps thoughts on your lessons learned or personal perspectives from Saudi Arabia in this case, from the perspective of each of your sectors. What has been the value added of the CCE lens, the circular carbon economy lens, and how does it help you either build policies or operate your business or think in terms of analytically about the energy transition? So first over to you, Al-Jawhara.
Thank you so much, Mari. And I think this is a very, very important question because, well, historically, we saw a focus on specific narratives when it comes to addressing emissions reduction in general, or when it comes to climate action, even more broadly. I think we saw narratives that focus on one-way paths towards emission reductions. We saw narratives that also focus on specific technologies. There were some technologies that were pushed more than others when it comes to the debate around how to reduce emissions. And I think these kind of narratives may not be very useful when the end goal is to truly achieve meaningful emissions reduction, not in specific developed world context, but also taking into consideration how the developing economies, how the least developed economies can take part in achieving emissions reduction. So the CCE, I think the value added from the CCE framework is that the most important one is that it recognizes that each country will have its unique pathway. This will primarily depend on a lot of factors, as I mentioned, including their national circumstances, including their ability to cater to different kinds of technologies, their current energy mix, and whether they can deploy a certain level of renewables at the moment, or maybe look at different technologies such as carbon capture, or even utilizing hydrogen, or even looking at, for example, nature-based solutions. And I think this holistic approach, or this holistic view gives us, maybe as a region and even to the world more broadly, a new way of looking at climate action. And I think it could face, I believe, less, I wouldn't call it resistance, but it would face less challenges from either the private or public sectors in many countries when it comes to achieving the net zero targets. So yeah, I believe this is the main value added, the value added from the CCE and from the CCE approach when compared to other systems. And I think the CCE approach also brings the remove aspect, which is not really included within, for example, the circular economy approach, which looks only at the 3 R's. And this also provides even a more holistic set of policy options that countries can adopt.
Thank you, Johara. So from what I see in my work also is exactly what you're saying, which is that for Saudi Arabia, which is what we focus a lot on here at the center, it has unlocked a number of ways of thinking about the energy transition. Shall we go next over to Dr. Fahad? Same question for you. How has the CCE added value to your work, to your company? And if you may unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I think, as I said from the beginning, that when we develop our carbon neutrality strategy, we found that circular carbon economy is the right framework that we are using, and we develop our strategy for carbon neutrality globally based on the circular carbon economy, because we see the value in having the flexibility and creating different options for us. It depends where we are operating. If it is in America, in Europe, in China, in KSA. So this is to give us the flexibility, and we think the framework from circular carbon economy is the right framework for our industry without being biased to any option or solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Abdulaziz, same question from a government perspective.
Thank you very much, Nari. And from a government perspective, the value added from CCE is that it energizes the whole economy, and it brings out it utilizes, as Dr. Fahad has said, all options available. So we're not taking a specific approach or a specific solution, but in fact we're taking an all hands on deck kind of approach. Everything and anything that could work is an option, without any bias to a specific source or specific system, in fact. And also it's a national program, as we have said, and it's the whole country is contributing to this common framework and common approach when it comes to the circular carbon economy.
Thank you so much. I would now like to hand over to Dr. Maha, who's there in the room. Do you have any questions? I will leave it to you to manage the questions, and then our speakers can take them up as indicated or as they see the most appropriate. Over to you, Dr. Maha.
Well, I would like to thank you, Mary, thank Abdulaziz, Al-Johara, Dr. Fahad for their very insightful and comprehensive presentations. I would like to open the floor and to have some questions here. Any questions from the floor? It seems that, okay, one question, please, sir. Can you please introduce yourself? Yeah, before. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all colleagues here in Geneva and those linked through Zoom. My name is Luca Marmo. I work in the Environment Directorate General of the European Commission, so here representing the European Union. Thank you very much to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for having organized such an interesting event that has presented the views on the circular carbon economy. I've learned a lot of interesting things today. More than a question, is a bit of a kind of comment with question. I think from the way in which the circular carbon economy has been presented looks a bit like in a European context to our European Green Deal, where we look at different aspects of sustainability, how the economy can grow, how we can achieve well-being for our people, but at the same time protective and conserving the environment. Issues around biodiversity protection have been mentioned, in particular by Mr. Abdulaziz, use of nature-based solutions and so on. All this is part of the European Green Deal. We are putting a specific focus on the circular economy, in particular the aspects on material resources, because there is an important energy dimension there, an important link with climate change. So it's not that focus on material in the circular economy at the European level would detract from addressing climate change or biodiversity aspects. In fact, if I use the figures from the International Resource Panel, about half of the climate change impacts are linked with the extraction, cultivation of material resources for the production of goods and products. So if we link climate emissions with the aspects of the energy needed, there is a lot of energy embedded in products, in goods, in materials. So the more we recycle them, the more we reuse them, which saves a further step in the cycle, is a way of minimizing impacts, climate change impacts, and so on. I think would be interesting. There was one point mentioned about the fact of the protection of 30% of land and marine areas by Saudi Arabia. Whether that is a target or is already something achieved today. In December, the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity will discuss a global biodiversity framework where these kind of targets will be included. So are these aspects part of the Saudi Arabia implementation of the vision around the circular carbon economy going to aspects beyond climate change per se? And another comment concerning the aspects around plastics. I think Dr. Fahad made the point that plastic has a bad publicity sometimes. We also agree that plastic is a necessary material, but there is an issue of we think that the current production and consumption system of plastics is too linear. We would like to make it circular, which also includes, from our viewpoint, the aspect of avoidance. So whenever alternatives are possible, or reuse aspects, so that, for example, single-use products, single-use plastic products that are used just for a few minutes, but require a lot of material and energy to be produced with connected emissions are avoided. So I think we need also to look at the reduced dimension, which is part of the 4 Rs. And I would say our particular focus should possibly be on that aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished panelists who would like to answer this question?
If I may jump in. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. I'll just briefly address some of your comments and leave the rest for the other panelists if they'd like to jump in. In regards to greening the kingdom and raising the protected areas by 30%, in the announcement of the Green Initiative, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince stated that we would be increasing the area of land that is being designated for protection in the coming year. So it's a process. It's not something that's achieved yet. And also, we are to achieve the first 20% of the goal to protect over 30% of the kingdom's total land area, with initiatives to deliver the final 10% to be announced later on as we move forward in the Saudi Green Initiative. In regards to the EU focusing on the circular economy, and that by addressing material waste and the emissions embedded in the production of goods and services on goods, the way we see it here in Saudi Arabia is that first of all, we're looking to diversify our economy. So there's an element of diversification that's needed for in the kingdom, and is already underway. Second, we're looking at economic prosperity. So we're trying to create new sectors, new jobs, new technologies, and by investing in these areas, we are widening the scope of circularity and to include all other sectors. And the beauty of the circularity and circular carbon economy is that it does in fact address the material waste. However, it only adds the fourth R, which addresses the emissions, which is an issue as well for all countries. Like, we're all striving to reduce our emissions. However, we're taking it a step, an extra step ahead by introducing the removal aspect and targeting and promoting the technologies that could capture these emissions, and as well utilize them in fuels and feedstock and further products that could be used with way less emissions embedded in them. And this is why the kingdom is embarking on such an approach to create value and to address emissions at the same time, without any bias. So we're looking at renewables, energy efficiency, and carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen, and many other sectors that are going to contribute to the circular carbon economy. And thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, please.
I'm Montasser Fathi from Egypt. First, I would like to thank my brothers, my colleague from the Saudi Arabia Kingdom for their amazing presentations, which reflect efforts exerted by the kingdom to reconstruct and to reform the whole region in the Middle East and the Arab region as well. And I would like to ask whether the scope of regional cooperation within the circular economy include only exchange of expertise and experience, or maybe go deeper to include common investment and to negotiate new rules to enhance the trade exchange in the field of circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Please, colleagues from the capital.
I can maybe take this question. I remember we discussed during the Middle East Green Initiative and looking for opportunity and even creating a platform for collaboration between the different countries in the region to complement each other. And as mentioned very well by our colleague from Egypt, I think this is one of the priority, or one looking for opportunity, for example, exchanging of technology, talents, exchange of information, and identifying and complementing each other. I think this is one of the key driver for the Middle East Green Initiative. I think it was a start last year, and hope we will see more in the coming one. And as an example of for example, is working together, the coming Green Initiative. It will be in Sharm el-Sheikh with the COP27. This is a clear indication that collaboration between countries in the region is in practice. I'm looking for opportunity for collaboration in all aspects, as it's in the investment and the technology as well as in the human capital.
If I may add as well to Dr. Fahad's intervention, in fact, leaders last year have agreed to continuously work together in achieving the goals of the Middle East Green Initiative, and developing a methodology to meet, to address the challenges that may arise and the objectives of the Middle East Green Initiative as a whole in the future. And just as a quick highlight, that the aim of this initiative is to actually promote sustainable development in the region, as well as preserving the environment and enhancing our actions towards these challenges. So that would definitely include the capacity building, the transfer of technology between partners, as well as investments in these areas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as our session is coming to an end, I would like to thank Mary, Dr. Fahad Abdulaziz, and Al Jawhara for their excellent presentations. And I would like to thank you all, the participants in person and remotely. And I would like also a special thanks goes to the Secretariat and the interpreters. Thank you. I thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much all.
Thank you, everybody.